Hi everyone, Sebastian here. What you're about to see is a conversation I had with Jared Alderman. Jared is a professional poker player and also a mindset coach, particularly for other professionals. I became interested in Jared's work because I actually have a student who I coach on strategy who was working with Jared on mindset. And even secondhand, I was impressed a lot with Jared's insight and his approaches. So, what resulted is a conversation that I think will be of interest and benefit really to anyone who plays poker. So, without further ado, please enjoy Jared Alderman. Thanks.
Okay. All right. Dude, how's it going? Sebastian, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's going good,
Good.
man.
Good. How yeah, what's been going on in your life lately?
I struggle with that question these days because it's just the same thing like every day, every week. It's just like
Yeah.
study, play poker, see clients, hang out with my girlfriend, and walk the dog. It's just the same, always,
That
always.
sounds like a rewarding schedule though.
Yeah, yeah. It's been good. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, sometimes feel spread a little thin, but overall, pretty happy with the way things are. I just hate
Nice,
that
man.
the happier I am, the worse I am at answering that question because it's just the
That's a funny that's a funny way of putting it. So yeah, what did you have in mind for this call?
I was thinking we could do sort of like a hybrid between just having a discussion where like maybe I have some questions about your approach to performance coaching and stuff like that. I listened to that amazing conversation you had on Poker with Presence last night. I listened to the one about your training to become a SEAL, which was just
Oh, okay,
absolutely
yeah. So
wild.
the on that podcast, on his podcast. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. So obviously we don't have to like rehash the whole thing, but like that kind of just brought up questions and things for me. And then yeah, and like we could do kind of like a hybrid of that, and then maybe like one of the questions I had was gonna ask you at some point is like a lot of the training I did in psychology and like the approach that I brought to clients so far is um, asking what the presenting problem is. And I think you work
Mm,
with a lot of people that don't have a clear presenting problem. Their
mm.
lives are they've got a good balance, but they're still trying to cultivate even more mindfulness, even more wellness and a higher performance. And so what that might look like in theory, but also like potentially applied to this conversation, like, what are some things that I could be doing that I'm not already? How can
Mm.
I kind of lead more by example in terms of the psychology of playing poker and so on. So yeah, so I
Awesome.
was just kind of thinking like we don't have to like pretend that this is like a complete coaching call, but we can put a little bit of that into it too.
Perfect. Well, I'll let you lead us, and I'll just follow. So,
Okay,
yeah,
cool.
what would you like to talk about first?
Yeah, well, I guess like we'll just start with how we met and whatever. I mean, I wanted to say like in a recording that um I had no idea who you were, and I saw you join the Carrot Corner, and I remember my immediate like terrible response was, I'm doing mindset coaching. We don't need another mindset coach here. And yeah, I started with that, and then I had students that were coming to you, and then you and I talked, and I was like, and then I heard that interview, and the whole time I've just been really humbled and impressed by your knowledge and your
Oh, thank
your
you.
kind of just general vibe and stance. So I kind of wanted to lead with that and just sort of see where it took us.
Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Yeah, it's yeah, I think that's a very normal psychological response. I think I have similar feelings of territorialness around the subject. So, but yeah, I appreciate it. Yeah, it's been great being a part of the Carrot Corner thing.
Yep.
And I did my only interaction, I did watch your coaching with Pete, where you were kind of doing a live, I don't know, therapy session, mindset coaching session with
Hmm.
Pete, which I thought was great. And then yeah, I've just seen your comments in the Discord, and then you reached out over Discord, and here we are.
I was actually going to ask you about that. You just said like therapy or like was it mindset coaching? I don't really know. I was just sort of curious because in your interview with Jason, so much about what you guys agreed was the key to being a good performance coach had to do with being a really active listener, which is a lot harder than
Mm,
it sounds, I think, or more
mm,
complicated than it sounds, and being able to meet the person where they're at without judgment, which sounds a lot
mm.
like therapy. But I also don't think that therapy and mindset coaching or performance coaching are the same.
Yeah.
So I'm sure you've thought about that kind of thing. What do you think separates the two?
I do think that where I think modern, or I guess I could say Western therapeutic approaches have kind of left a lot of unexplored terrain. They're moving more into this these days, but they've done a very good job at cataloging all of the ways that you can deviate from the average in a downward direction. So like maybe like negative conditions for like
Hmm.
mental life. And they've done a fairly poor job at cataloging all the ways that you can thrive and all of the ways. And so what I think what happens is, and common in therapy, is what you just get a cultural or definition of what is normal. And then Western therapy has just said like, well, let's just get people to there. And they have not done a great job at saying, well, we could raise the bar of what's normal. We could raise the bar of what it means to live a psychologically fulfilling and thriving life, and how do we get there? And obviously, you have things like positive psychology and in these fields that are working in that direction, but I would say just not nearly as much as many Eastern traditions have prioritized the highest form of well-being as the aim.
Hmm.
And so what I do with people much more is, yes, it's when in performance, is to say like, what is your highest bar? What is the moments where you can thrive and feel the greatest amounts of fulfillment and performance in your life, and how do we get there? And I
Hmm.
would say, no matter what you're doing when you're working with people, be it helping someone with some massive difficulty in their life, or some large, like you said, presenting problem, um, or whenever you're trying to talk about thriving, the skill of acceptance and deep listening, and meeting someone where they're at without judgment, and meeting yourself where you're at without judgment, really is the path, like the path to both suffering less in more traditional ways that we understand, but also to thriving. And I think it's just learning to raise the bar of what does it mean to really accept yourself. And I think there's again, I think in some Eastern traditions, um, they have really raised that bar quite high, and said like, you can really accept yourself in a way that causes you to not desire to that just causes a deep connection with yourself in each moment, that it could be on offer, that you don't have to sacrifice um, in pursuit of anything that you want. And that's really what I want to encourage people more too, is in each moment of your life, can you treat it as a moment of connecting with your human life, and to realize that doing that more and more and more doesn't sacrifice any of your pursuits. It doesn't sacrifice any of the things you want to accomplish, achieve, and thrive at. And more importantly, it's actually the best foundation for you thriving in the things that you want, is to be able to be in this moment truly, and as unfiltered by conceptual thought as possible, as unlayered by what you might call this moment, to just let it be what it is. And that's where your knowledge and wisdom is going to inform you best on what to do next.
Hmm. It's one of those answers where you have to stop and think about what's going on for a second. But it made me think a lot of a writer I quite like, and especially in the his mental health journey. It was a very did a lot of bad things, but David Foster Wallace was
Oh
like
yeah.
crippled by conceptual thought at all
Yeah.
times, and he writes very well about how you can be crippled by your conceptual analysis. So that's just kind of where my brain went, but um,
Mm.
yeah, I guess just on that topic too, I see so many clients in coaching and in therapy, and they're so worried that that acceptance piece will mean that they lose their drive.
Mm.
And that to me is like the hardest leap of faith for so many people is if I start rewarding myself for when things go well, and I start relaxing a little bit more when things are going badly, and I take the pressure off of myself, then I'm going
Yeah.
to fall asleep at the wheel, and then everyone's going to stop loving me, and then
Yeah.
and they can't let go of that anxiety because they feel like they need it to succeed.
Yeah.
Um, Especially if they've used it all their life. I don't know.
Yeah. It's very tragic. I mean, it speaks to what we have in Western culture, though, and this probably has its roots also in Christianity, like just being a Judeo-Christian culture.
Hmm.
Just this concept of sin nature, and this concept of you are not trustworthy. Like
Mm.
you at your core, you should not trust yourself. And that's really emphasized in a lot of our culture and a lot of our ideas and a lot of our the things that's just like if you just let yourself do whatever is natural to you, you will destroy your life. Like you are not trustworthy. That's very interesting too, because that's the opposite again of, I'm a practicing meditator and I take a lot from Buddhist philosophy. I wouldn't consider myself a practicing Buddhist, but it's the opposite background that they come from, which is that your truest nature is completely good. It's that your deepest nature is wise and is compassionate, is patient, and is hardworking, and it is everything you want it to be. These different philosophies do a lot of heavy lifting for a lot of this psychological suffering and difficulty, where you believe your instincts are to be fought versus more deeply understood,
Mm.
and conceptual layers of conceptual thought is an actual response to this stressful condition of not trusting ourselves. We feel like we have to battle our own experience constantly with filters. And that's why so much of the work that I try to do with people is let's just remove the filters. Let's just stop filtering your experience. And in that process, yeah, there's like a learning process. There's you get your sea legs in the process of learning to trust yourself. There's, sometimes you remove one uh, boundary that you put on yourself that was totally unnecessary. And then so you're just completely out of balance. But oftentimes the answer is not to insert that boundary again. It's to open the other side and to learn to balance yourself in that way. And then there you can tap into this kind of easeful, restful kind of performance where your performance isn't being pushed forward. You're not urging yourself forward in every moment, but you're just kind of falling naturally where your mind takes you.
Yeah. That when you were talking with Jason on Poker with Presence, you guys finished the conversation talking about like how you start to integrate all of your knowledge as a poker player once you just are able to relax. And
Yeah.
I haven't been playing poker professionally for that long, and so I've only recently started to feel that feeling of being able to relax. And I was like, hell yes, amen. Like that's just for sure. Like as soon as you can stop being like, he's betting 1/3 here too often. What do I do? And just sort of do what feels right. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a different kind of confidence that comes and because what you're saying there is like you do what feels right. It's a mistake to just believe that a lot of play people are like, well, if I do what feels right, I'm going to make tons of mistakes. And this is a big attitude shift in being present. Because when you're present, one of the things that you realize, which is most deeply true about you, is that you aren't this concrete thing. You are a process. And when you start working in line with being a process, mistakes are critical parts of this process. You to free yourself up to make mistakes gives you a different kind of confidence where you trust yourself. Not that I'm going to make the right decision, but I trust myself to learn. I trust
Mm.
myself to learn from what happens and then to make better decisions in the future. Whereas when you view things very conceptually, everything has this discrete box around it. In this moment is this test of right and wrong, and to get it wrong means for this moment to be a failure. Whereas when
Mm.
you just understand, like, no, you are a flow, you are a process. This is a thing that is the direction you're headed matters so much more than this discrete moment. Trusting yourself comes so much more naturally, and you can relax because you're doing what comes naturally, not because you necessarily believe it is the best decision, but because you know that, well, first of all you can do is do what feels right to you, right? Like what else? Like all you can do is the best that you know how to do. And then all you can do is trust yourself to learn. And to me, that is a really deep source of confidence. The trust that I will learn is a far more stable source of confidence than the trust that I will make good decisions. The feeling that I will make good decisions is quite fragile because it shatters the moment you don't know what to do.
Mm.
But the sense that I know I can learn and I can make the most of whatever happens, that is a very hard thing, a hard level of confidence to shake.
I always felt that my fear of making wrong decisions was always relative to who the audience was. Like when I would
Yeah.
play so much worse when I was playing against Jarrett Man or something, because I'm like, I grew up watching this guy on YouTube and he's gonna see that I don't know whether I should overbet here. And eventually I was just like, man, this just doesn't matter. And I don't know how I quite made that leap, but once I did, even players
Mm,
that I feel have an edge on me, I didn't feel this need to measure up to them in every decision. And
mm.
and some I feel like I got a lot closer just through that
Yeah.
acceptance and that letting go.
Yeah.
And yeah.
once you're playing poker and you're not worried about not making mistakes, too, your attention can go to where it matters, which is like the
Mhm.
mistakes of your opponent, you know, and
Yeah.
that's like this natural shift that just happens when you're just like, when I'm not focused on not making a mistake and I'm just thinking about, I'm just here, relax, then your strategic mind is naturally centered around the mistakes of your opponent. And even someone who might quote unquote have an edge on you, yeah, the edge they're going to have is going to be its smallest when you're focused on their strategy and not on yours. Like when you're focused on what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, and how to play against it. And when you're focused on yours, um, I mean, you're playing in a closed system. Like, where's there to go? You know, like how do I get feedback on anything? How do I improve at all?
This is sort of leading to the question or question about anxiety. I was wondering if, to me, like anxiety is a lot about control, and people
Mm,
spend a lot of time worrying about what they can't control in an attempt to control what they can't control. And that conversation you had with Jason about trying to become a SEAL and the neurosis that you had,
mm,
right?
yeah.
And ego was part of it, but I think ego was not the top layer of what was going on. Do you think anxiety was a big part of that, or a version of anxiety?
I think trying to pretend I was a person who didn't experience anxiety was a big
Mm,
part of that, right? Like I think wanting to be in this environment and thrive in it, it was my own struggle against my own humanity. And for those, you know, to recap the story for those who haven't listened to it, but I go into it in depth in the Poker with Presence podcast with Jason Su. I trained for years to try to become a Navy SEAL and got into the Navy, into this program, and went to Buds, and then it would eventually quit in Hell Week. And there was just a rejection of my own capacity to suffer that caused me to not really know how to handle suffering when it materialized at its deepest. And you know, I'm certainly experiencing a lot of anxiety in the moment of quitting. You know, whether or
mm,
not the whole journey was colored by that, but in the moment of quitting, there was a deep amount of anxiety with, yeah, with a lack of control of myself, of my own human capacity to go through difficulty, and not wanting that to be true. Yeah, I mean, there's when you talk about stressors, you know, and the psychological term of stressors is anything that feels like it's depriving you of things that are necessary for life, you know, necessary for living. And the three universal stressors people, psychologists have, you know, what they say are lack of control, lack of knowledge, and lack of certainty.
mm,
These are like the three universal stressors, and anxiety. One of my teachers, which I really appreciated, the way he framed anxiety is he said anxiety is our lack of tolerance for how much control you have. A lot of people mistake this where they'll be dealing with anxiety and they think it's I don't have enough control, and like the lack of control is what's causing me stress. And it's like, no, you have the control you have always. like
mhm,
like you know, whether or not I tell you or reveal to you or make you believe you have more control than you have, it's the amount of control you actually have isn't changing, right? It's the your perceived level of control. And so a lot of what meditation is actually is expanding your tolerance for the amount of control that you have. And
mm.
thus, through doing that, you just reduce your propensity to become anxious. And that is one of the areas in which one of the sort of domains that meditation really uh, expands you on. It's just like you just become much more tolerant of whatever your condition, your situation in life is, and that situation happens to be one of pretty little control.
I think I've gone through most of my life without having too much anxiety, but I don't necessarily think it's because of a greater sense of mindfulness or acceptance. I think it's just that sometimes people go through the mental process of, you know, I haven't studied enough for this test. I might fail this test and then my life will end. And I kind of go, I haven't studied for this test. I might fail this test and then I'll be fine. Right.
Yeah,
But if the end of that process was me saying, and I won't be fine,
yeah,
I'm sure I would be not handling it the best somebody could.
yeah,
So it's just my ability to kind of look at the stressor or look at the threat in the environment and go like, yeah, even if this is bad, it'll be okay. Um, but so I do feel anxiety crop up, and I've had pressure to grow in poker. because poker is not something where my whole life I have been good at it, or I've always
Yeah.
felt like I had an edge there. And so I see parts of myself unfold through that I
Mm.
hadn't seen in other areas. It never unfolded in school because school was always easy. It never unfolded at home because my home life was good. Um, it's with poker that I see that side of myself. So yeah, there's you can be like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm not an anxious person, and then it can surprise you.
Yeah, and something that's interesting in my own life, I resonate. I feel similarly to your story. I mean, I think that's why I don't. I mean, a part of me just used to chase down, these extremely stressful or anxious and anxiety-inducing situations for whatever reason. Like that's why I ended up trying to become a SEAL. But I resonate with your general description of like not struggling with anxiety much. I did have one instance of my life where I went through a few month period of dealing with pretty crippling panic attacks. Um, and it was around just the concept of death, like
Mm,
the idea that I was going to die. And I was meditating a lot at the time, and there was just certain feelings coming up that couldn't be avoided. And but I was going to say one of the things that I have found through meditating more is surprisingly there is anxiety. I've noticed there's been anxiety in my life that has just gone very unnoticed. Like I think I would have reported myself as a very not anxious person. And my experience with just becoming a little bit more attuned with my nervous system is to realize like, oh, there's moments of stress and anxiety that I have just not really been connected with, just not kind of overlooked, and kind of it has driven me immediately into thinking about something or conceptualizing something or some things where to where I've just never really connected with it or noticed it. And yeah, so that's been an interesting part of just learning to meditate more. Is one of the most interesting things about meditating a lot is to realize how much your own experience is a mystery, like how much you really think you have a handle on what it's like to be you, and like you just like, I'm like this, and I am this way, and you can just be totally wrong.
yeah,
You can just,
yeah.
yeah, you can just, yeah, have it quite backwards. And it's funny because like when like I think now I believe myself to be a more anxious person than, but it's really because I'm just like, it's kind of like people who like are like, oh, I'm really dirty, but their places are immaculate. And it's like it's your sense
Hmm.
that you're dirty that keeps your place so clean.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
have this sense that I deal with a lot more like stress and anxiety than like probably is relatively reason like relative to some certain people. I probably don't have much, but I have learned to be far more sensitive to it. Of just like, oh, I do feel a little off. Like I don't feel quite at ease in this moment. But
Right. It goes back to what we just were talking about, this sort of invented norm, like what is a normal acceptable amount of anxiety
yeah,
versus all human beings have anxiety, and you're just
yeah,
better at noticing this like part of being human that's happening to you.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Have you dabbled with meditation much?
That was gonna be my next question because I have definitely dabbled in meditation. I have definitely even had the audacity to prescribe meditation. And I fall off the wagon all the
Yeah,
time. The
yeah.
only time that I always make sure I meditate is when I take an Uber to a live game. I always get my 5 minutes of
Mm,
meditation in there. But
yeah,
other than that, I was going to ask you, maybe just to get me kind of motivated, or for listeners who are curious, what is your meditation practice like? Like, what does it look like?
yeah.
And what would be your tips for someone who's starting out and trying to build a regular habit?
Yeah, the regular habit bit is tough for a lot of people. It was tough for me for a long time, and I think there is a natural progression of like feeling this pull to do this thing, and falling off the wagon a lot. For me, honestly, I mean, I would recommend do what's manageable. Like, obviously,
Mhm.
like have reasonable expectations. Don't set something ridiculous. Also, I would say reframe what it is you're doing. Like a lot of people, they have these really high bars of what they imagine meditation is supposed to be. And meditation is just dedicated time to connect with what it's like to be you.
Mhm.
And that encompasses any experience. So for a lot of people, they'll be like, well, I need to not think, or like when I'm getting distracted, then I'm failing this. And it's like, no, it's just another teacher of mine who I really appreciate. He said, meditation is giving nature back to nature. And to explain that, your meditation is connecting with the fact that you are a natural process. You're part of nature. And what you are observing and what you're connecting with is nature. So when you sit down and you find yourself thinking, you can always just remind yourself that this is nature, right? I go to pay attention to my breath and I get distracted. This is nature. Like that's what this is. This is nature. And the more ease and kindness you bring into your practice, the the more nourishing your practice will be, and the easier it will be to keep coming back to it. When it becomes this thing of I'm going to develop these skills, I'm going to get really good at attention, I'm going to get really good at stress management, I'm going to get really good at this striving energy, this like reaching, climbing energy is very demoralizing when you're faced with the truth of your mind, which is it is a quite stressful, chaotic place to be. And
Mhm.
so when you believe you're going to sit down and organize yourself, that I'm going to sit down, I'm just going to march in this line, that's not going to happen.
Mhm.
And the greater ease you can meet that process with, that truth with, the easier you will find meditation to be. And so there's many kind of things you can focus on for meditation. It doesn't have to be your breath, but one of the most rewarding that I have found is to pay closest attention to the amount of effort you're giving.
Mhm.
When you sit down, always ask myself, am I conditioning ease? Am I
Mhm.
conditioning ease in my heart and in my mind? And am I sitting here with an open hand and with ease? Or am I tensing? Am I striving? Am I trying to do this thing? And when I notice striving, can I meet that with ease? Can I? This is nature. This is my mind's nature. This is how my mind, my nervous system interacts with this practice.
Yeah.
And I would say once this happens and meditation starts becoming less of a thing to do to derive certain benefits of like, oh, I'm going to get these things down. And it becomes more of just a way, an attitude towards life. And sitting is a dedicated time for me to cultivate this attitude towards life. It becomes far easier, but also you realize every moment of your life is a moment of potential meditation. I can be pouring coffee and just this is nature. This is what it feels like in this moment. Pouring coffee feels like this. I'm taking a shower. I'm talking. I'm angry. I'm disappointed. Anything. It feels like this. This is what life feels like in this moment.
Mhm.
And for me personally, I try to sit twice a day, 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes at night. But
Oof.
but again, that's really just time to remember that if I didn't get any time today to connect with
Mhm.
with Jared, with this incarnation of being alive, this is my time to do that. But it's really not something that is for developing to get out of the typical habit forming
Yeah.
ideas around meditation and striving ideas. I think bring a lot more ease into practice and makes it far more enjoyable and easier to do.
Right. Right. Yeah. So it's not how do I up my cardio? It's
Yeah.
yeah. It's about I hate the word self-care these days, but yeah, it's about a kind of relationship with yourself that you're cultivating. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just this is it. This is your one life. When I think about like what am I doing here on life? Like I don't believe in the afterlife, so I don't want to ruffle feathers around that. But in my view, this is your one life, and you have as long as you're here to really connect with what it's like to be human. And it's worth framing that way because it's not even because it's so easy for this like future oriented, goal oriented thing to slip into your mind. So even things like self care and relationship with yourself, you get this sense like, oh, I'm developing something, and I'm,
Mhm.
but no, it's just, can you connect with what it's like right now, no matter what that is? Can you just in this moment you have whatever relationship you have with yourself, and whatever that is an expression of you being human. And so much of what ails us as people is we just don't feel like we belong, right? Like we just don't feel like we belong here in ourselves, in our own bodies. with
Hmm.
the other people. And the more and more and more you just connect with each moment and just what it's like to be you in each moment, the more and more you're connecting with what it's like to be human. And the more you realize every possible thing you experience is evidence you belong here. Everything. Hardship, difficulty, lack of connection, struggling, not wanting to sit, sitting down and hating it, everything. That's what it's like to be human. And when you stop judging that and you just connect with it, every experience is a doorway to a deep sense of belonging, of like, I belong here. And, Thich Nhat Hanh used to say when he would lead meditations, like, I have arrived, I am home. And meditation's about learning to come home to yourself. Like, you are where you belong. And every possible experience you have is evidence of that.
Damn. I know you said you don't like to be called a guru, but that's you're I think you're onto something, Jared. I mean, I think you're really walking the walk, like I can see I there's knowledge, there's passion, there's integration in what you're talking about, and I really, really admire it. Um,
Oh,
yeah, yeah.
thanks, man. I really appreciate that. I will be sitting. I start a retreat on Sunday, so wish me luck. I'll be going away for 20 days. So,
Oh wow. So is there any anxiety there?
yeah, I would say there's, it's always tough to just like, I won't connect, I won't talk with anybody for those 20 days, So, well, one, I have a son and a daughter, so I have two kids I
Mm,
won't see for 20 days. That's always challenging. I mean, then there's just like, life just keeps going. So like I have a business, I have things I work on, and I'm basically just committing to not working on those things and hoping they will have the momentum I wish they do when I come back. So that's always difficult. And then yeah, I mean, I've sat retreat before, so I know uh it's not it's not always rainbows and butterflies, so you never really know what you're going to get on retreat, but yeah, there's some anticipation around like what it's going to be like.
what have been difficult parts in the past? Has it been,
Mm.
the silence, the quiet, the having to sit with your thoughts, or has it been boredom, or what has been the struggle or the challenge in the past?
Yeah, all of that. The most difficult things are honestly the areas of yourself that you truly just don't accept yourself. You
Hmm.
know, when you
Yeah.
when you're there and you're alone and you're not really alone. There's other people sitting retreat with you, but no one talks to each other. No one even looks at each other. So all of your social instincts, all of these things you do to like be on display for people slowly tune down, and then you're just left with you with the tendencies of your mind. you know um and there's with all of us there's a lot of judgment there. There's a lot of ways that we just create suffering for ourselves, and a lot of ways that there are parts of ourselves we just are not willing to love.
Hmm.
And the hard part of retreat is there's just nowhere to go. There's nothing, there's no way to distract yourself, no way to convince yourself this thing is something it's not. And and so you're just there, and you're just but usually through that there's some really powerful experiences of opening and of softening and of just meeting yourself in really beautiful ways. But it can be challenging. Um yeah, I've sat what's called a metta retreat, a loving kindness retreat, where you basically, the whole retreat, all you do, so there's it's an attention practice, so it's just like practices of coming back to your breath, but instead of coming back to your breath, you come back to these phrases of like, may I be happy, may I be healthy, may I be safe, may I live with ease. And you just come back to it. And it's not like an affirmation. Some people think of it as like, oh, hopefully these things happen to you. Those things aren't going to happen to you. You're not going to be happy, healthy, and live with ease all of your life. That's just not going to happen. But it's about conditioning the wish for yourself, this just good intention, this goodwill towards yourself, and wanting that for yourself.
Right.
And in doing that and in practicing that, you'll go through a really beautiful process of really loving yourself, of like feeling really open and just like really accepting and comforting of yourself and life and everybody. But in that process, also the things that are just completely unlovable and you just come right to the surface. And so you'll go through these waves of just like, oh, I feel so amazing. And then there's a natural process of clinging to that, of like, I don't want this ever to go. And then these things come up that are in you that you're just like, they call them purifications, where it's just like, this thing, and it's just like it feels just like you had this valve of just like kindness open, and then just it's just been filled full of mud, and instantly you feel completely disconnected from yourself and everybody, and then you just have to keep doing the practice. And in this time, one time on this time of retreat, it was one of the most beautiful moments where I yeah, because this happens and your natural mind is like, how do I get out of this? Like, what strategy do
Hmm.
I enact? What practice? Like, how
Yeah.
do I strive out of it? And the most beautiful moment for me is I just fell down in my room on retreat, just just admitted to myself, just this is just really hard and I don't know what to do. And in that, I could completely connect with that experience. Like the
Hmm.
real resistance there was I was not willing to just not know what to do. I was not willing to just be in something hard and just not know what to do. And in opening up to that, it just then the same, it's amazing, like the same valve turned right back on, and these things that seemed so unlovable before seemed again so human, like so connecting, so um yeah, so beautiful. But
It's funny the parallel between providing coaching or psychotherapy to someone else and the growth that we do with ourselves, because that is, I think, not only the hardest thing to do with yourself, but also the hardest thing to do with a client
yeah,
is for them to say, I don't know what to do in this situation. I'm completely lost. I feel completely hopeless, and not to have the answer, to just be able
yeah,
to sit with them in that.
yeah,
There's such a desire to not just ease our own suffering, but to control the suffering of someone else. And
yeah,
reality is you can't.
yeah. And I mean, coaching for me has been a really beautiful like growth in that, like learning to work with people and learning all of the, conditioning of my own mind to pursue my own emotional comforts, and just like no, and like saying something really wise, and someone being like, wow, and like how that makes me feel. And like, and viewing moments of someone's discomfort as moments, as opportunities for me to establish, me. Yeah, it really helped because I went through a course with a mindfulness course, but for people who technically are therapists. It was for people who work with clients in any capacity, but a large percentage were therapists. And I was in this course, and the teacher who taught it, who I love, his name is Matthew Brensilver, but he was talking about working with clients, and he was saying, it really helps to remember where your power comes from in helping people. It doesn't come from any technique or piece of advice or anything you can give someone. It comes from intimacy with yourself. That's
Hmm.
what he said, is like deep intimacy with yourself. Like the deeper and more intimate you are with yourself, that is where like your power will come from and being able to help people. And it really stuck with me. And the more that I work with people when I'm with someone, I try to really it's been a practice of constantly saying in my own mind when I'm working with someone, I don't know what to do. Like to constantly remind myself of that, of I don't know what to do, like while someone's speaking. And it really helps me listen really deeply and yeah, just really connect with the mystery that is life. That is like, and to recognize I don't know your experience even, right?
Yeah,
Like that's a hard thing to remember, that like as much as I might think I know what you're going through, I don't know what you're going through. And coaching has been so rewarding for all of this, for just developing all of these things. Like that I really feel if I hadn't, like didn't hadn't worked with people, it's just such a beautiful like landscape to like try to improve in these areas of your life.
totally. Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even the clients that I sometimes do feel, like pulling my hair out, which happens, they're all teaching me something. And usually if that's happening with a client, it's about me. It's
Yeah.
not about them, right? And so
Yeah.
it's always teaching. You're always teaching yourself through it.
Yeah. I mean, and you have the benefit, I guess would be a optimistic way of framing it, of, because you work clinically with people, right? I don't know how selective you are about your clientele. Like I get to kind of just, I have no, medical or any standards to uphold. So I just get to like not work with people who I just don't want to work with, or I don't, that's probably something you can do also.
Mm.
But the environment, I don't know, is very, I feel like I have a lot of agency, like I
Right.
can do, I feel like I've never once considered like what some board or anything might think of how I'm behaving in a session or anything like that. But
Hmm.
I think it would be interesting. It would be a totally different thing. And I get to work with the people for whom I have the biggest passion for, which is people who want to perform at a high level, because that's an area of myself that I've had a hard time accepting, or working with and dealing with. So like I get to like reduce it to that. I guess I'm curious, do you, yeah, like what is your process for like working with people? Do you ever decide not to work with somebody because they cause you too much difficulty or
Um, I had one. Well, so do you mean clinically or do you mean in poker?
clinically? Yeah, clinically.
Clinically. Yeah, I've never had that happen to me yet. And the ethical obligation would be to only discontinue therapy if I felt that I wasn't useful to them.
Sure.
So the ethical contract that I take on with them is that it's not ever because it's inconvenient to me that I would be able to get rid of a client. It would be because, and these things can overlap, right? Like if
Yeah,
you really
obviously.
just feel like you can't humanize a client, you can't see eye to eye with them for whatever reason, then you
Yeah.
also have to own up to that and say, look, I don't think I'm the best person to help you. But
Yeah.
that's never quite happened to me. And usually if I've run into a roadblock, it's not insurmountable, and it is an opportunity for self-reflection.
Yeah. Yeah.
Why don't you just
Yeah.
do
I
what
mean,
I want you to do?
it's tough, man. Yeah. I mean, it's just you, whenever you see the things crop up in somebody that you don't like or that you haven't conditioned an acceptance for, I mean, it is usually a part of yourself you haven't found acceptance for too. That's what I find. Like the things that I just want to like brush off as super simple or super easy or judge somebody. Um, Almost certainly when that part of me crops up as well, I'm equally as dismissive and as judgmental and as like and as not
Mhm.
understanding,
Yeah.
you know. Um, yeah, yeah, it's tough. But I mean, you also it's one thing that's been hard for me, and maybe you can agree with this. It's like you also have to like you have to have this weird, I mean, acceptance and grace towards yourself too. Of just like you're just not gonna like everything about everybody. Like you're just,
Yeah.
you're not going to,
Yeah. I've been pleasantly surprised for the most part with the clinical setting because as you know, like the earnest desire for changing the parts of ourselves that are causing pain like takes a lot of courage. Like to come and
Yeah.
say I have these flaws and or I have these difficulties and I need help with them is something that I actually don't think everybody is willing or capable of doing.
Yeah.
And so therapy actually selects for people that have a kind of courage, which I've been pleasantly surprised by.
Well, there's
Um,
probably if you ever worked, which I don't know if you do, but it doesn't sound like you do. But if you ever work in somewhere where people are being prescribed therapy they don't
yeah,
want, that would be really rough. I could
yeah,
imagine that would be really difficult.
yeah. I mean,
Um,
I used to teach as well. I taught English, and yeah,
okay.
like most people don't want to be there. Most students want to be anywhere else, and that sucks, right? So yeah, it'd be probably worse than that, but for sort of analogous, yeah, if it was a prison population or something. But you do
Yeah.
also get clients that don't know what they want. They don't know what they want from you. They don't know what they want from
Mm,
themselves. They just know that something is wrong. And often, if
yeah.
it's like a personality disorder or something, that's when it's hardest. And it's not even really that you don't like the person because they're too whatever political in one way or the other or something like that. It's just that you're in this process together and the kind of stuckness you're experiencing is like a storm. Like, and you
Mm,
leave it feeling like the client, right? Where
mm,
the client comes in and the client doesn't know if they love you or hate you that day, or the client doesn't know if they love or hate the people in their lives that day. And then
mm,
you leave being like, I don't know if I love or hate the client today. And it's just this kind of
mm,
this transference, counter transference thing going on. So
mm.
that can be for me the most challenging. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, by through that like mindfulness and that paying attention to, you you learn to kind of like the people you're seeing in part because of foibles and flaws in
Yeah.
ways that
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
profoundly different than you, which is
Yeah.
hopefully, again, like things that you can apply to yourself, right? That yeah.
Yeah, I had because when you go on retreat, if you're doing loving kindness, the practice is usually you starting with something easy that's easy to generate this feeling of like goodwill of like wanting the best for something, and then to move towards people more difficult. And so if you're on a longer retreat, you'll sit with a certain kind of person, like an easy person, until you feel like your heart is just like completely open to it, and then you'll move to like a neutral person, and then to a difficult person. And when working with a difficult person, I had a teacher who's, said something that I really appreciated, which was like, when you're working with someone difficult, you don't have to like them. You just have to
Hmm.
love them.
Hmm.
And for me, it was for a long time, I would often judge my own preferences of people who I just like liked being around or didn't like being around. as
Hmm.
though it was on the same spectrum of love and compassion and something. But it was really useful to realize that like, oh, like preferential, like who I would spend time with is on a totally different spectrum than who I
Yeah.
want the best for and who I wish
Right.
the best for. And like,
Yeah.
and so like sometimes when I'm working with clients, I'm like, I would never be friends with you. like I wouldn't want to hang out with you on the weekends. But I absolutely, and what's funny is like when I would became more open to the one, when I allowed myself to have this preference, it became far more accessible to want what was best for them. Whereas when I was in my own tension around the fact that I disliked them, it was far more difficult to access goodwill
Hmm.
and desire and love for
Yeah.
people.
And the
But
like can be as dangerous as the dislike too, right? I mean, like the kind
yeah,
of projection of connection when perhaps there is none, or the projection that they are
mm,
like you in every way when they are in fact not.
mm, yeah,
I can relate utterly to your experience when in fact everyone is separate from us, and all of those things can really create complications
yeah,
too.
yeah. That's true.
Yeah. So I guess I know we've been talking for a while, but the last thing I want to make sure that I ask you about is just to hear your thoughts on kind of what we started with. Like I know that you promote mindfulness and well-being as the facets through which you pursue higher performance, and that it's not that you will get happiness by performing well, but that you will perform better if you cultivate happiness and respect for
Mm.
yourself and self-awareness. When you have clients that say, "Yep, I have no complaints in my life. I'm not having panic attacks. I don't break keyboards. I'm happy with how things are going, but I want to continue to grow." What do you look for? What kind of questions do you start with?
So I mean that's kind of like I will say that is kind of like my pitch to the poker community at large. I will say individually, that's not always the area of direct improvement that I go for. If you're
Mm,
a poker player or anything else, I do believe within mindfulness there is this attitude of treating attention as a resource, as a skill in and of itself that I think is really ripe ground for improvement in performance, whether or not it's directly to improve your well-being. Although I do think improving your well-being is worthwhile. Um, and the big thing that I work on with people is less so improving your well-being directly, but more decreasing your reactivity. That how often do we feel we have freedom in relationship to our experience? When experience can come up in a particular way, I can have a particular feeling, sensation, or thought or idea. And then do I feel like I have some sort of agentsful freedom around how I respond to that? Or do I
mm,
feel like my hands get taken off the wheel and I just get driven into a decision I didn't want to make? And that I would say is far more the kind of work that I do with people is how do we cultivate less reactivity, more equanimity with our experience and find more freedom in relationship to what comes up in our experience. So with some people at the highest, I work with some people who, are, you know, Triton crushers. And what we work on a lot is more noticing what it's like to make decisions and like again start using attention as a resource. Attention is your most basic resource, and in every moment where your attention is, you're training your brain about what matters in this moment. So X experience comes up and my intention goes wherever it goes. You are conditioning your brain that in these moments with this experience, that's what matters.
mhm,
And naturally, if you can be more intentional about this training process, you can train your brain to draw its attention, or at least to start feeling freedom to point your attention with what towards what matters in this moment. So
mhm,
I might I might notice, I mean, sometimes I work with people with live tells. I might notice a behavior from somebody, and then I might start running in my mind about what this behavior means. But the truth is, the most important area for uh, interpreting a live tell is more your social instincts. It is like, what is this? How does this strike my nervous system? What does this tell me about how this person's feeling? Like, can I be aware of this? And our attention going into like this thought based problem solving mode versus like into our bodies and like, well, how's my nervous system responding to this? You can train your nervous system to key in on the information that really matters in a moment.
mhm,
And that's probably, yeah, more like the kind of work that I do with people, especially like now, obviously, there's areas of unhappiness. And it just so happens that the way we react to things without control often creates a lack of contentment. Like when the ways in which we chase after things that feel good and avoid things that feel bad and check out from things that don't capture our attention at all, the ways in which all of this is just automatic does create a lack of well-being. But my pitch for people that usually resonates more with people is like, yeah, let's just condition less reactivity and let's have more freedom in relationship to our decisions.
Choice. We have
Yes.
we struggle with the illusion of choice when there is none, and then we
Yeah.
struggle with the illusion of no choice when we get to make
So
choice.
yeah, and that's why I use the term freedom, because it's not control, right? You don't have
Mhm.
control necessarily, but there's some freedom, some sense of like psychological distance between the experience and the behavioral implication of that experience. And when you can break the chain of behavioral implication, that's when you experience some freedom around your experiences. Yeah,
Cool, man.
yeah.
Well,
Well,
yeah, so I just I'm really fascinated by the work you do, and I'm really
thanks, man. I
glad
appreciate
to have you in my orbit because
it. Yeah.
it's just so funny. Like your insight and your talent's pretty undeniable. Like I would have something relayed to me by a student I was coaching poker. I was like, oh, I'm getting coaching from Jared, and he said this. I'm like, shit, that's really smart. And and then I'll catch an Instagram clip, and I'm like, that's really smart too. So
Oh
I
man, that
felt
means
yeah.
I really appreciate that. That means so much to me. And yeah, I'm gonna thanks. Yeah, I hope we'll do more work and stuff together. I'm really excited about just being involved with more people in the space. So
Awesome, man. Cool.
yeah,
Well, thanks for your time, and yeah, I hope everybody enjoyed conversation with Jared. And there you have it. I really enjoyed my conversation with Jared, and I hope you did as well. I've linked to his socials and his website in the description for this video. I'll have lots more content coming your way. If you enjoyed what you saw, please consider leaving a like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts, please feel free to drop them in the comments. For now, take care, have a good rest of your day, and I will catch you on the flip.